Welcome to Nameless Debate Radio, where radioactivity is contagious. You can join us in broadening our minds on the Nameless Debates Discord via the link below and even feature here yourself, if you've got what it takes.
I haven't actually read it. I mean to read some of Jordan Peterson's stuff. I haven't yet, and I need to do that sometime. Such a
He
popular
has some
topic.
very insane things in Maps of Meaning.
Well, I
Yeah.
haven't actually read the book, but I've watched a bunch of his lectures about it, and he makes a lot of sense, man.
Oh no, he makes a lot of sense, but in the book he says just
Oh, well, his
very-
epistemology is crooked, so I mean, I would imagine he might say some pretty outlandish shit.
Yeah. But yeah, just I don't know too much about him. Hey, if you give me a summary of his works, then I might actually pay attention.
No, the book is it's
Summary.
It's just
I love it.
It's an elaborate Jungian, essentially, explanation of belief in the human mind and human life.
Sure. But I think that, when it comes to its ability to explain the form of media that's unconscious, it does very fucking well.
True that.
So you guys would rate it.
I found it
Rated.
weird that he wrote one book and was it 96 or something?
You know,
then he didn't write another one for.
Maybe we should have a thing where you just like a bot puts out a thinker. Like we just ping a name in the server, right? And then people just rate that thinker.
That's a good
you put,
idea, dude.
you put the reacts on the bottom, maybe
that's a good idea.
out of 5. And so it'd be cool because we can kind of just grab how people are evaluating this or that person, ping marks and just see how people evaluate it, and so on.
Mhm.
Yep. This goes well for me, checking consensus, although none of you guys are experts. So, but you could ping stuff we could even find we can even ping philosophical ideas, right? So we can be you could ping realism, see how much of the server agrees, disagrees, and maybe even to what extent. So if if you do yes, instead of doing thumbs up, thumbs down, if you do reacts 1 to 9, you can start to get a measure of confidence rather than a binary thing.
Hey, look in suggestions.
Yeah, I agree. That'll be fun. People want us to have roles for opposing each other, but I have no idea what I'd call it.
Is it for opposing each other, or is it just for people to be opposed? You know what I mean?
Know. It's not clear in the question, and it's anonymous.
No. I could probably find out who said it.
Who said it? I need to just go and harass them.
Let me see.
But what does this mean?
Clam.
See, now I need to ask him.
Clam.
What does he mean? Does it because there's 2 ways in my head, right? It means that I argue with you often, or it means that everyone should just fight me.
Both are true, though, right?
Yeah, sure. Both are true, but if you're gonna go making roles, right? It's slightly different. If you make a role for us opposing each other, that seems kind of not so useful. But I'm curious about a role of this dude debates. But then that's what the ranks mean, right? So
Yeah, I don't know.
so it's well,
Oh, speaking of debate, what do you guys think of the upcoming Peterson Zizek?
Nothing. I'm
not a big fan of it.
I don't really care too much for like other thinkers, as odd as that might be. So I don't tend to recognize names. I just do my own novel, weird thing on my own. Zizek is a postmodernist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Postmodernism kind of isn't one thing specifically. He definitely
Zizek is a
aspects of it.
postmodernist. He's a
Well, he
postmodernist.
denounces many aspects of postmodernism. So to say he is a postmodernist,
No, but
again,
he
it's-
accepts the central idea, though.
It doesn't matter. Like with postmodernism, my best response nowadays is just to call myself a meta-modernist. It solves my problems.
my
Dude,
favorite part
I'm
of
a
postmodernism.
meta-modernist. I've never even heard
Exactly. Boom, meta-modernism. It's great.
My very
It's pretty
favorite
good.
part of
I'm gonna use that,
postmodernism
dude.
is when I got the encyclopedia of Library Genesis. Oh boy.
Encyclopedia of Postmodernism?
You know, Library Genesis.
Yeah,
I don't
no.
know what that
What
is.
book did you pull? Really?
It was specifically this one. I think it's a Routledge Companion and then Postmodernism, and they have fucking thousands of companion books by collective articles on one topic by experts in the field. I think it's Routledge or Blackwell. We're pretty sure it's Routledge. Yeah, there's all sorts of obscure things you can get off of that.
I just woke off the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy for these terms. It's good because sometimes I do need a definition, and postmodernism is honestly one of those terms that I need a definition for.
How do you
Because
define
otherwise,
it? Or what's your understanding, I should say?
I just attempt my best to use the one that's provided by the Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy, which is like it's a reaction against a naive and earnest confidence in progress and against confidence in objective and scientific truth. In philosophy, therefore, it implies a mistrust of the grand rectus of modernity, the large-scale justifications of Western society, confidence in progress, visible in Kant, Hegel, or Marx, arising from utopian visions of perfection achieved through evolution, social improvement, education, or the deployment of science. In its post-structuralist aspects, it includes a denial of any fixed meaning or any correspondence between any language and the world, or any fixed reality or truth or fact to be the object of inquiry. So,
There it is.
by what it's defined to be, to me, like this is how I define it, unless someone can provide me a more succinct definition, that's better.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And the bit of it that I tend to focus on is exactly the denial of truth.
Yeah. Like the denial of education and science already hurts. Like, why fam? And then it just proceeds to be worse.
Yeah,
It was like,
dude, to deny truth itself, it's like, what do you think is? What do you fucking when you look up at an airplane? What do you think that is? Is that magic?
it's like they sometimes they'll pose as like a soft skepticism, so they'd be like, it just could be otherwise. But I'm like, that's not informative. Like if you're going after the sense of like
It's not
could
only
maybe
not
be
informative. Like, come on, like at least give me an explanation. This shit works.
Well, I mean, look. If postmodern, like you get some people rephrase it and they're like, oh, it's just like saying that what we call objective might not be objectively the case. I'm like, well, that is ancient, right? Like you're talking at least 200 years of that, if not 400 years of that, which means that postmodernism is actually just ancient.
Actually,
Like,
Buddha said that.
It's like if your claim here is just skepticism, then well, skepticism, buddy, is as old as Greece, if not older, right? And therefore, you've got post nothing. You're not postmodernist. You're just repeating ancient skeptics, which is great. But
I mean, I think they'll feel like that's a reinforcement of their position, honestly.
Yeah, it doesn't make it postmodernism though. It just makes it what skepticism has been around for ages. It's like, come on, have you not read Plato?
For sure. No, but most people who are postmodernists don't quite understand that that it doesn't make sense to reject truth and have like a car that runs. You know what I mean?
Maybe your car just sometimes runs.
But it always runs, Midnight. Come on.
I think it's silly.
And you know what? You know what? When it doesn't run, it's broken and you can fix it.
I find that like skepticism, like the small doses of skepticism, which are fair, right? And it's like a scale. It's something you scale. Like it's not like it shouldn't be a binary. Now, when it comes to absolute and global skepticism, particularly absolute skepticism, I look at them like that's just childish. Forget how illogical it is. It's childish. It's just like, hey, maybe I'm a butterfly. I'm like, okay, good. You've really contributed here. Like your contribution's really useful. So I look at like your much more absolutist hard skeptics is very just childish. Remembering that philosophy is the pursuit of wisdom. There is nothing wise about telling me that I may be a butterfly.
Well, they're childishly confused, but there is wisdom in the understanding that one never quite knows what's true.
Yes, but it's not like a big.
For
it's
sure,
not
for
the.
sure.
It's
No,
not
look,
a
I just
defeater
think
to the sciences.
No, I agree. It's just it's an attempt to be illustrative about one of the limits of knowledge before we knew how to like say that in like
Yeah,
precise
but like
language.
but like I say, philosophy is the pursuit of wisdom. If that's all you say, you're not being wise, right?
Well,
You're
that's
just
not.
you've
That's
you've
generally
taken
not
the
the
first.
rule. You know what I mean? That particular argument was
If you
by
come across
somebody that's
someone
not
who, yeah, if you come across someone who just describes himself as a hard skeptic and they can't give you anything positive, right?
Yeah, I agree. That
Their
kind of person
shtick,
is basically look. That person is like basically worthless to someone who's a pragmatist. Pragmatist. Wow.
really
God
that's
damn.
right. Like if you just wanna be skeptical and you can't posit anything, then you start to become really useless.
Mhm.
Because you need to posit something. We live in a world.
But I
Something's
think it's
happening, and we need to do something about it.
for sure. Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I find it funny how useless and worthless are the same thing in your particular framework. Julius as well, though, who appears to be AFK. I think.
I'll be on later. Check it
Alright,
out. See you.
let it do. So how are you finding? I'm guessing it's your first day, Captain Devil Dick Willie. What a name, dude. No, it's AFK as well. Goddamn. Are you even there, Ara?
Hi, I just got back.
Dude, you should have dunked me and not replied.
That would have been sad though.
It would have been so funny with the recording, but dude, I have a recording like that. I haven't
Oh
uploaded
shit.
it. It's a Venny, and he like says some like fucking brutal shit, and then like no one responds, and then he's just like left hanging for like 35 seconds at the end of a recording, dude. It's so fucked.
Man, I forgot that shit was recorded.
Yeah, dude. That was a good discussion, I think.
It was. Rest in pieces. Yeah, I've glimpsed a little bit. I don't know if this is. Oh, you're still here, Spider. So I've looked at like the
Nah,
beginnings of
Spider's deafened.
Oh, okay. So I think that there might be an interesting case.
Spider's
Um,
back.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm browsing through some of the critique of Stephen Hicks and like the video of that, and I wonder like it does put seeds of doubt because there's a lot of allegations of inconsistency in like quoting and stuff, and the question is, uh, to me, is there's two questions that are raised. First of all, is whether that excerpt that I focused on is actually like going to be debunked itself, because to me that excerpt was the more interesting part of the lecture. I might have skimmed the inconsistencies in the rest of it because I was focused on that. And the second question is about besides the misquotes and misattributions and the the allegations that he's conflating postmodernism with other ideologies, that those might all be true allegations. What I wonder about is whether his attacks on Derrida are inconsistent. And here's why I'm suspicious. There is a quote used by a professor that seems to answer Hicks's criticism of Derrida, and by saying that Derrida does not actually hold such a position. And the question is, was Derrida consistent on that position? And what I remember is, wait, not Derrida, sorry. It was Foucault, actually, I believe he was referencing. Oh, now maybe I confused the two. I remember Foucault's debate with Chomsky, and I remember the types of questions and attacks that Chomsky used and raised. And I remember some of them being mirrored by Hicks. So I wonder whether it's an actual misrepresentation, or whether those people historically had positions that shifted over time, or were just not consistent enough, where they tried to sit on two chairs, as people often try to when they don't have, when there's conflicting or unclear positions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, like, since the basic criticism of postmodernism is of like structure itself, it's pretty easy to sit on a couple of chairs.
No. I'll give you the actual the specific thing they're talking about is, I think it's either Derrida or Foucault. I instantly forgot the name of who was being attacked. But the main idea is that one of their assertions is that you can analyze the text, like a text or work, based on the things that it contained without outside references. And I actually generally agree with that. I believe that's what you should be doing. And then work. They're making the assertion that a good work of art or literature or anything should be bringing out many thoughts and many possible interpretations, instead of like reducing them to just one.
Sure.
So if you
but
have,
it's
like,
not limited to that. It's not limited
and
to art and music. It's limited to science as well.
Yes.
But
one moment.
yeah.
Let me finish.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
so one of the things that he's kind of defending against in that older lecture court, is against the allegation that because Derrida says that there are multiple interpretations, he also supposes, like, he doesn't actually support the position that all interpretations are equally valuable. Okay, and while that might not be true of Derrida, it seems to be true of many of the people that supposedly follow in his footsteps. I keep hearing that this idea that there's like an anti-cluster, that anything is possible. When you debate, for example, I'm not gonna name drop him, but there are several debaters in the Discord community that would like defend their attack on an idea by saying that all of these other possibilities exist, and it seems to be in the spirit of postmodernism, but actually, according to this debunk, it's not. So it's strange to me. Is it an actual? Is Hicks misrepresenting postmodernism in his attack, or did postmodernism?
There's a
actually...
difference.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's a difference between saying that there is no like ultimate objective interpretation of a text, and then I guess like the converse of that. Like, there's a difference between saying that and then saying that therefore all interpretations are equally valid.
Okay, why don't you read the thing? Why don't you read the thing that I linked in Tap and Text Chat?
Okay.
No, it's fine.
Who is this by? Is this like from Foucault?
It's a summary of one of his works.
So interesting. So the question to me is Hicks like when is he attacking Foucault in the lecture in the book? And if he is he like attacking a straw man? Because that seems to be the case. That seems to be what this debunk alleges. It alleges that he's a straw manning
It is strawmanning so primitively that even like an old lecture is debunking him by like some, even some existing interpretations of Foucault's work by academics debunk his initial assertion because he strawmans Foucault.
Insync, what in this did you want to point out?
Okay, so this is talking about what truth is. You get that, right?
Yes.
Do you know what the argument that's being put forward is?
I haven't read it all, but what would you like me to read? Do you want me to just read the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, give me a few minutes.
It's not actually that long. But yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, it ends here. All right, I'll read it in a second. Tenet, for your video, I don't honestly have much to say. The first 16 minutes or so are just a critique of Marxism, most of which I would actually agree with. I'm not a Marxist myself for many of the reasons that Stephen Hicks puts forward here. I disagree with some of his statements regarding like the shrinkage of the middle class. Since the 1970s, the middle class has been shrinking in most developed countries. But aside from things like that, like I don't really.
That's actually that's a common misrepresentation of statistics. It has been shrinking in the Western countries, but it has been growing worldwide. So the growth in the United States was frozen, but if you include China, and you shouldn't exclude China, if you include China, it's been
countries that are
and so if we're looking at the if we're evaluating greater good, then you can have an argument that you shouldn't ignore China and all the other countries that were benefiting from this globalization.
Right.
So I don't know. I used to buy the Marxist argument that like there's a guy, something Wolf, who's keeps showing up on YouTube and on like talk shows.
You mean Richard Wolff?
Richard Wolff, yes. And he keeps saying that, wages have not climbed since the 70s while productivity quadrupled. He's right in the United States, but he completely ignores about the rest of the world. And if his point is about making the entire world great through either socialism or capitalism, if he's trying to prove that capitalism is like a bad system, then he has to answer for all those Chinese and Indian and other, second and third world country people who are being lifted out of poverty. He has to basically condemn them.
So this isn't really the topic of conversation, but my final point to that would be Marxism generally sees the world in terms of economic stages, right? Each more advanced than the previous, right? You advance from some sort of pre-feudalism to feudalism, monarchism, these kind of like serfdom societies where you have autocratic rulers with, complete authority, and a class of peasants that produce that, and you move from this into capitalism, and you move from this into some sort of post-capitalism or socialism or communism, right? And so communists, some will, I suppose, but it wasn't my impression that Marx saw like the transition from feudalism to capitalism as a bad thing. He saw it more as an inevitable thing, right? Like this was very much in line with the evolution of society and economic systems. So I think in that way, Marxism can account for people in countries like China or like developing nations, right? Like capitalism in developing nations will pull people out of poverty, right? It will create a stronger middle class. It'll give people better lives. Oh, sorry. But other than that, so yeah, the first 16 minutes of this video, I don't really have a problem with. I guess my main issue is that he kind of presents like an idea, so the idea is Marxists faced with the failures of Marxism, right? In the Soviet Union, in its predictive power regarding economic trends, things like
in the 50s, yes.
Yeah, right. That because of this, they needed an out. And so what they did was they adopted postmodernism, because what postmodernism told you was, hey, everything's just a narrative. You don't really need to care about science or data, and you can just believe, your own, like whatever you are currently aligned to, and that's fine. Is that like a fair representation of what he's saying here?
Somewhat, and I think that's yeah. Okay, I'll just skip. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I have a major issue with what happens at the end of this video. Because, so, like, I guess in general, like, I can't really say much about this because this is just, like, a thesis, right? He doesn't actually provide any evidence to support this. Maybe if I watched the whole lecture, he would go on to that. But the person he decides to cite is Frederick Jameson. And Frederick Jameson literally wrote a book called... Frederick Jameson is a Marxist political theorist, right?
Uh-huh.
But he also wrote a book called Postmodernism. I believe it's Postmodernism, the cultural logic of late capitalism or late stage capitalism. Like Frederick Jameson was very critical of postmodernism and postmodern thinkers, like to the extent that he wrote a book on it, right, from a Marxist perspective. And this quote here doesn't seem to support what Hicks is asserting. What Jameson is saying here is that everything in the last analysis, or everything is in the last analysis, political. If you read the full context of this quote, which is in an essay called Literature as a Socially Symbolic Act, he just seems to be asserting that, like, you can't really conduct, like, analysis without but you can't separate your analysis from politics or ideology completely, right? Which I don't think anybody here would really disagree with. Because what you consider to be good, or what you consider to be utility, or what you consider to be like the thing we should be striving for, all of these are going to be bound to some form of ideology, right?
I would part of we won't be getting into it immediately, but I do like to find ways to disagree. I think that saying that everything is influenced by, like, all analysis is influenced by your politics would be true. The question is how much of that influence is weighted, and how much can you detect heuristically, can you detect universal qualities and universal desires to humans as they currently are? Because
Sure.
I don't believe that humans evolved significantly enough biologically in the period that they evolved significantly culturally. And so it's kind of like, to me, the claim that there is no uniform kind of goals or things that are uniform for all humanity even. I hope that's not the claim being made, basically.
Yeah, here I can link the if you want to see for yourself or judge for yourself.
I'll concede this.
My only point is that to pull this quote out from a Marxist
would be like awful, basically,
like vehemently anti-postmodernist, and then to say, oh well, look, the Marxist said, like this one quote proves that he's saying, oh, I acknowledge that all the data contradicts my presuppositions, but I'm just going to believe them anyway because, like, truth doesn't exist, Lamau. I think this is like a very disingenuous representation of what he's saying.
I'll admit, I find this convincing to the point where I will have to, like, dig into this a lot more. Because
that's fine. I understand. This is all like. Really
I can tell you. I have only one out at this point, and I'll tell you this out. The only out that somebody like Stephen Hicks has, in my eyes, if all of these criticisms are true, like all of these basically things that he actually attributes to other postmodernists and to, like, people who unfairly criticize ideas, like, these false quotes is a really big issue once they become, like, most of the book. If you do,
he doesn't reference it, does he?
Well, like, again, and I think I haven't watched this video in a while, but I think he says, like, it's okay to have, like, a bad quote in a book, but the fact that there are so many right.
No, that's exactly what I'm quoting from it. Yes. So once there's a certain threshold beyond which your work is just, like, not really scientific, not really rigorous. Sorry, not even scientific, not rigorous. And that's an issue, and maybe to the point where you can say this is not just, like, this is not a mistake. This is, at this level, it's propaganda. Like, it must be intentional to make so many mistakes, and that is a really harsh criticism. It can actually be very effective. The only saving grace that he may have is there is an idea where somebody's general line of reasoning is correct, or they found some correlation that has merit, but they're like awful at supporting it. That's the only out I have regarding this.
I think, yeah, if you get to his like characterization of Kant, I remember that being like particularly strange.
Sure. It's like with the I mentioned the case of I think it's called Viktor Suvorov or Rezun, his actual name, the ex-spy analyst that wrote a revisionist history of World War II. He was absolutely atrocious in the details, misquotes, awful references, inaccuracies. But what he did is he started a debate that later on a lot of much better historians took over and continued with much actual evidence and merit. And so his books are kind of a meme. If you want to just dismiss the theory, you would point at the books. So pretty much, if this criticism is correct and Hicks doesn't have an answer to these criticisms, then it's in pretty bad shape. The only thing I'm missing, and maybe it's later in the video, I do want a debunk of his core idea. To me, that's like that would be the holy grail of the debunk. And I think it probably will arrive because he's going chronologically through the whole lecture. This summary is still dense enough for my brain to slow down.
Okay.
I'll have to think about this.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, I don't want to I'm not a postmodernist, and I believe the person who created this video is actually a postmodernist. I'm not a postmodernist or a Marxist. I just don't see. I don't know. It seems like there's a trend for people like Peterson and Hicks to basically categorize like the entirety of the modern left as this
I know. Like, I know. But you know what might be happening? Here's the thing that might be happening, and this is what I'm kind of curious about investigating. The criticism might be correct by Peterson and Hicks when applied to the lowest common denominator, to the person that thinks that he's a postmodernist Marxist or Marxist, that exists in this modern society, that thinks that he's an intersectionalist, right? And when you observe the behavior of like the low-level political functionary or the political activist teenager, maybe the criticism is actually valid, but that does not mean that you're criticizing the actual ideology, because the adherence of an ideology might be like absolutely batshit. Like, I'm absolutely completely against the actual original ideology they're supposedly supporting. A good historical narrative is like the teachings of Christ leading to the Inquisition. Like, how does turn the other cheek turned into like burn somebody on a fire? And often that's like a problem with ideologies, is that their adherents that claim to be the followers are not like actual followers, and so the things that Jordan Peterson is describing as criticizing in like the academia, these are things that can be observed, quantified, like pointed at by many anecdotes and examples and studies. But then maybe he's mischaracterizing them, like their ideological form.
Maybe, I don't know. So like, I can understand what you're saying, and to a certain extent, I'll agree with you that There are people which probably have much closer, like their ideas might tend much closer to what Peterson is trying to criticize here. But at the same time, I feel like in all the lectures I've seen from Peterson, he's typically addressing these figures pretty directly. Like he's not just talking about, like he never specifies this, right? He'll usually frame this in he'll usually address like Foucault or Derrida and say like,
Right.
you know, these thinkers, their ideas, their insidiousness, their intent, their like it. I don't know.
And he misrepresents them, basically.
Yeah, well, it just seems it's not a matter of like him intentionally misrepresenting someone. What I'm talking about now is like his criticism seemed directed not towards the lowest common denominator.
Well, it's. I think it's both. You're probably right, but I remember like references to what I'm saying is the general attacks on academia and the attitudes. The reason why why these attacks are popular is because his audience is well aware of them from personal experience. Like when I saw the video of the young man who stands up and says, as a cis white male, I have this opinion, and you shouldn't listen to me. I remember the first time I watched that YouTube video, I thought that I was watching a skit. I thought it was parody. I didn't think it was reality. I thought it was somebody like just messing with me. And then I realized that this is something that I didn't know that existed, and this exists, and this is like common. And then I have personal experience of finding a book in the garbage of the Homer's Odyssey, and it was filled with like side notes by a student who was in some intersectionality class with the absolute most absurd assertions about the meaning of the book from some crazy intersectionality position. And to me, all of this is alien. Like to me, this is like an alien artifact. Finding something like this, because I didn't experience this when I was in school. Like I've had a teacher in college.
Yeah, but aren't you in East Europe though? Sorry to
What?
interrupt, but
No.
aren't you in Eastern Europe?
I was the high school and university and university in the United States, and I'm in a fairly liberal city in New York, and I've had professors that dealt with, for example, deconstruction, and we analyzed Hamlet from a deconstructionist mindset where literal meaning of the text and like what it was actually meaning, don't disregard anomalies, all of this type of deep analysis happened. I never remember encountering anything of this type of intersectionality, which behaves now like a cult, in my experience. And I didn't expect it to encounter this in a democratic society because it's so alien to me. I was brought up by this idea that America is a country of individualism, where I can stop being, people will stop calling me out as like whatever my group affiliation is. And this was my maybe misconception of American society, but that's how I looked at it as an outsider and what I expected to find when I came in. And this colored my view of everything. And then these YouTube videos that started popping up, in the past, I guess, 5 years, maybe even past 10 years if I was paying attention, they're completely alien to that idea. And yet they exist, like they're there. These people, that's how they behave. Do you understand? So is their behavior actually postmodernist, or are they like a mockery of postmodernism?
They're just using the label.
What does that mean?
What's up?
He said they're just using the label.
Maybe they're not
in a joking sense.
I don't even know if they're
mislabeling
using
them.
the label though, right? Like,
yeah, maybe the mislabeling is incorrect. So maybe
like I don't think these people would self-describe as postmodernists.
That's a good question. But I do remember this being brought up in debates. like it's definitely also an influence in debatosphere, or in like these debate discords where you have a debate with a person and he says, and you refer to some universal constant about humans, or some scientific fact that's supported by a lot of evidence, and the person will say, well, there's no actual universal truth, right? Therefore there could be other theories, right? Therefore nothing is true, right? And if you're inexperienced, you kind of say yes, 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 because you're not like a realist, you're not a moral realist, and you subscribe to this conflation, and you kind of give up the debate, basically. I've seen that happen like repeatedly, especially it's most famously used as a debate against racial categories and IQ research. Like you see that type of attack. There's no the heuristic of race is meaningless, or more actually, I shouldn't even use that extreme example. More commonly, when you make an assertion about how society should function and you allude to like some kind of a greater good, people would attack you and say, well, this is all your subjective idea of the good. And like there's no the idea that they kind of omit that there is an idea of intersubjectivity, and you have to discover that. You have to discover this word and start using it, because they yes, because they have such a successful and historically successful and a realistic attack against this idea of objective truths and objectivity in general.
You keep cutting out.
No, I keep stopping to think that to make sure that it's completely coherent. Basically, they seem to be using like a principles of deconstruction to claim that there is.
Oh well, deconstruction would be something else, though.
Yes, that's true.
Again, deconstruction is much more about taking each component of a whole, isolating it, examining its meaning and its significance on its own, and then finding kind of different ways to interpret or recognize meaning in a text or a body.
Yeah, I meant dismantling of ideas.
Sure. Yeah.
You do agree that you must have encountered this before, or am I wrong about this? With this assertion, I mean, you have seen these types of debates where.
I mean, these types of debates, I think there's a lot more nuance involved than just saying like, well, anything, all ideas are valid, Lamau. Like I myself would engage in a lot of this style of rhetoric with regards to things like race or gender or like human nature or things like that, or in terms of like claims of like ideological objectivity. The idea that we want common sense policy or common sense reforms.
Right.
I think things like this generally aren't particularly useful, because everybody.
Well, they are.
Shit is common sense.
But this is my debate evolution has been. I've been convinced by these counter arguments. I've been convinced that what about the rest of the planet? What about China or some other place? People will have different common sense. And you listen to this and you think, yeah, this is true, right?
Well, relatively, they have different common sense. There's a lot of crossover.
Well, exactly. And then eventually you realize, hey, wait a minute, there's a shuffling game going on here. Actually, there's a lot of crossover, partly because part of the kind of the culture of even Western countries has been appropriation of everybody else. Like, if you look at Art Deco as an art and an architectural style, it's basically people were exposed to Eastern designs and to like Egyptian art in museums, and they decided to try and recreate that as part of to marry that with classical architectural styles, and design styles, and they created this idea of Art Deco. It's like a marriage of kind of East and West almost, and there's examples of that in philosophy and other forms of art. And so there's a lot of integration of ideas, and that integration is possible because if you read Lao Tse and then you read, some philosopher from the West, you will find that they will say many similar things because
there's also the constants. There are constants of morality. I think I saw it on Pinker's blog, but I didn't know there was a thing published in Nature the other day, and it's apparently the first, but I don't fucking know. I've met a lot of researchers, and I don't trust their claims a lot of the time. But apparently, this is the first international study of like 7 different societies on different parts of the world, and there's constants in morality amongst them all.
Well, yes, and there are precursors to that study would be books like the Campbell's, all the books about myths, and Hero's Journey, I believe, was one of the books. Let me find out the reference.
Oh, you mean Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey?
Yes.
Yeah.
He had another book, something about the power of myths, I think. My brain is awful about that. I keep The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I should have remembered.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, but there's another book that's also important, I believe. Let me find bibliography.
The power of myths to live by. Okay, so you're not talking about the power of myth or myths.
No, maybe I am. Yeah, so he has like many books on that kind of explore he observes
the masks of God.
He observes these things, and then I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not surprised that like a study would try to do that and would find support in real time in like current societies.
Mm.
And the reason why I'm not surprised is because for the same argument that humans are mostly very, very similar in terms of how the brain functions.
Mm.
So if we're so similar, how would our cultures be? They would be different, but they can't be that, at some core levels, at the level of the 10 Commandments, at the level of some fundamental, rules, they should be very, very close.
But then you could argue, well, because of multiracial societies like the United States, Australia, that if there was hardwired different morals, then you'd see it. But if someone's brought up, say, Chinese in a third generation here in Australia, they're like everyone else in their surrounding area.
Well, because there's evidence that people can be united by some other group affiliation, like if there's a thing called being Australian, and people tend to do that. They tend to, like, over time there's ethnogenesis even happening, where people with different ethnicities, but because they live in the same area, they will start gravitating towards similar patterns, features, speech, and so on.
Mm.
I
think the alt-right would counteract and say, except for the Jews.
they would try, but because their arguments is normally based on feelings, they ignore the science. They misquote science,
God,
and I love using that because some of the it's really funny. I've been arguing with somebody who's like basically on the left side of it, and I quoted an article that's often quoted by the alt-right, but the trick in the debate was that I knew not only how the alt-right quotes it and misquotes it, but also what the paper actually says and what the author of the paper later said in articles about it. And there's 2 parts to his argument. It was basically that when you mix people of different origins together in one close proximity, like in a neighborhood, trust and other, economic and cultural markers decline quite significantly initially. And it's only when they're unified by some unifying idea, which is the part 2 of the study, that you see that all of these markers go up again. So
Yes.
a simple example is, if you're in a neighborhood with complete strangers that have different customs, you would feel you wouldn't feel like there's trust between you. But if you all join the same sports team, if your children all join the same soccer team, and you were like their parents, then suddenly for these social interactions, you would trust people a lot more. And all it took was basically this external factor of unity.
Yeah, right. Of course, you need commonalities.
And so that study, the way the alt-right quotes it is, they quote part 1. They want you to agree that people living together that have different ideologies will clash, and it's true. But it depends on whether you actually have. They basically claim that there's no functional melting pot, and I believe that there's problems like the melting pot. There's no melting pot that doesn't have issues. All of them have issues. The issues that some societies manage to overcome them quite efficiently, even when they're doing just awful decisions. I could probably quote Israel as one example. It's a country of a huge East plus West melting pot that's occurring. There's the Ashkenazi Jews, the Moroccan Jews, the Arab Jews,
Sub-Saharan Jews as well, I think.
Yes, Sub-Saharan Jews combined, and then those two kind of combined with this very, they still have ethnic kind of oriented parties a little bit, but mostly not. It's mostly now ideological. And then Russians came in, and it's and they had ethnic Russians parties for a while, but then those dissolved more or less, and now they have, they're mixed again, even on the level of political representation. And the melting pot policies they have, according to what I'm hearing from other Russians that live there, some of the melting pot policies are absolutely awful, dumb bullshit. But some of them actually worked, and they do there is they have a societal identity. Part of that is because they have things like mass conscription. Everybody ends up in the same military, wearing the same uniform, and after a few years of that, you can't really be completely distrustful of the other.
Right, and this is a thing where actually this is a topic I've been thinking about. This is I think a cataclysmic problem with certain groups in, for example, Australia or Britain or wherever, particularly Islam, that the idea of the other tribeness seems to continue, and that it doesn't become a unified tribe. And that's obviously not fucking good in the long term.
I agree with that. My analysis would be that there's 2 parts that will enable this. I believe that part of it is within the problem of infallibility is really hurting that the marriage between religion and politics within that society. The idea of the infallibility of the religious element of that society, the marriage between the local cultures. A lot of the bad things about that people criticize Islam, or they used to criticize Islam, are actually pretty much just regional, awful regional traditions that persist through time. They're not necessarily inherent to the religion, but because the religion has a colonial Arab influence on things, then it brings also these Arab cultural elements into every single manifestation of that religion worldwide, because
You cut out.
Because the adherents tend to to associate their religion with that type of behavior very closely. And there's issues with reform that some people say is impossible, some people say is possible. There's a big debate over that. But then on the other side, there is the kind of liberal elite of all of most Western countries, including Australia, that claim they believe that they used to believe that a melting pot was possible, and that's why we should bring in immigrants. But then they started fighting against the melting pot themselves. The kind of anti-colonial idea is that you shouldn't impose your Australian culture on others.
Oh,
You
this
should-
shit.
Yes, exactly. So it's the kind of the idea that the melting pot is a colonial
let
instrument.
there be multiple fucking tribes within the super tribe, and it'll turn out just great.
Well, kind of, yes. And the problem is that there's a kernel of some truth in that. You don't need to. All of them are making a fallacious argument. It is a fallacious argument that, for example, Italian Americans are no longer Italian. It's just fallacious. These are people that maintain a lot of like the traditions, the language, the some of them don't, some of them
Here's
do.
a fact you may not know. Did you know that Italians that live overseas can still vote in the elections? And they do massively here.
What do you mean? Which ones?
They vote in the president and the parliament, and it's
Italy?
very in Italy, because I went to school in an Italian area.
Okay.
And fuck, it's it was on TV for last year's election.
The alt-right argument is generally that the reason why Italians and other European countries integrate well is because their ideas are closer ideologically, like the Italian kind of culture is closer ideologically to Western culture in general, and therefore it's much easier to absorb. And, like, the differences aren't that great. There is some merit to this argument, but the problem is that it doesn't disprove the potential efficiency of the melting pot. I think that what breaks the melting pot is when there's groups within your country that actively fight against it, that create a victim culture where they say, and I just watched an ex-Muslim there's like a channel by an ex-Muslim on YouTube who still like observes a lot of the kind of.
What's his name? I might know of him.
I'll try to find a channel, but basically he positioned this idea that whenever whenever he talks to religious adherents, like more like fundamentalist kind of people in his country, I believe he's in Britain, they see that he's dressed like a Westerner. They accuse him of being colonized. They say, you wear these colonizers' clothes,
It's
right?
true.
That's what they say. You wear the colonizer's clothes, and they use this type of victim culture language or anti-colonial language to describe this. But then
it's the same thing with the blacks in the States if they're acting white.
Yes, but then he calls them out on the hypocrisies that exist because they wear Arabic clothing that has nothing to do necessarily with the religion itself. So in essence, they're accusing him of being colonized by Western culture, while they're being colonized by Arabic culture, and they're not necessarily Arabic. They may be Persian. They may be Indian. They may be Pakistani.
Indonesian shit, yeah.
Indonesian, right? So why do they all wear the Arabic garbs from the Middle Ages?
Well, in Australia, the answer's simple because it's hot as fuck.
Fine. Yes, if it's utilitarian, I kind of understand it, but
I totally get what you're saying. When I was a teenager, I was not a patch member, but I was a hang around with a motorcycle club. The guy I knew, he was Muslim. He had family in it, so I got in through that road. And yeah, that was a very terrifying look into the self-segregation and ideological supremacy within at least the parts of the Muslim community that I was exposed to at that time.
and they do this. If you look at how they treat somebody like Majid Nawaz.
Oh god, dude, fuck, he slandered so much here.
Yeah, and it's like it's they're not making themselves look good when they slander him, because he's like their best, maybe last hope for their ideology, because he believes that they can be redeemed. Without him, literally, we would be like, it wouldn't be a phobia.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a different debate where I need to drink something. Been talking too much. So, does this bot have an off switch in sync?
He's AFK, I think.
All right.
No, this is an interesting server. I haven't been on Discord for fucking ages. Ran into some guy fucking messaged me randomly the other week and said, "Oh well, I know these other political Discords ages ago. I was in some of them, and you guys are actually smarter than the rest of them that I've been involved with. I was in Uncensored Politics, which some of the members here were in before, years ago, or maybe last year. Yeah."
Yeah, one moment. Let me find this.
Anyway, fellas, thank you so much for the lively debate and the discussion. It's been very stimulating. I'll see you around.
Yeah, cheers, man.
So yeah, you like the argument that you put forward about perception relies on an equivocation between two types of perception, and there are different types, and the difference is relevant.
Well, okay. What I meant to say was that when I said perception, what I essentially meant was collecting any information. And I was saying that in the sense of how I'm using them, whether it comes from the senses or not doesn't.
Those of the past who were responsible for the messages that we receive in the religious texts of today, they were very insightful individuals who could see something about reality which was true, often lots of stuff about it that was true. And they did their best to codify that. And they did a good job, but they didn't do a good enough job. Unfortunately, let's admit it, they just didn't. It's not quite accurate, and it's inaccurate in ways that we've demonstrated in the last 200 years.
And when he goes into what a thing, when he says, okay, when you distinguish the difference between a thing as it is and a thing as it appears to you, when you gain some kind of knowledge that shows that it didn't work, that pattern of knowledge, you negate that information and then sublate what you've learned from the negation into your next pattern of knowledge until you eventually get that perfect pattern of knowledge, right? He creates this process for finding an ideal pattern of knowledge as he goes through it in the phenomenology of spirit.